Is my mic on? Yeah. So I'm Gené Teare. I'm head of content at CrunchBase. And the reason I'm here today is I've conducted 3 studies in the last 2 years looking at gender equity out of the CrunchBase dataset. So I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of some of the studies that we've done. I joined CrunchBase really early on. I joined over 8 years ago. And at this point, CrunchBase is a very old startup that just got a Series A over a year ago. So we got spun out of TechCrunch, AOL, and Verizon, and Emergence backed us with our Series A. So we're kind of on our own and charting a new course. So we did 3 studies out of the CrunchBase dataset. We looked at female founders because I think founders are a very strong leadership indicator. These individuals are trailblazers. They take on the whole responsibility for their company and their future. And so looking at founder trends around gender for us was an extremely interesting first step. The next study we did looked at a female founder and male founder educational backgrounds and how they diverged. And then the third study looked at women in venture. When we looked at the female founder studies, what was very interesting to us is that you go in, and before you've run the study, you don't know what the data is going to tell you. And we, to be honest, were very late to this game. You know, Tracy Chow's piece around gender equity when it came to engineers came out in October 2013, and we only added gender to the data set in March 2015. So we were very late to the game, but because CrunchBase has been around for 8 years, and we've been building our data set over the last years, it meant we had a very strong foundation to kick off, and within 2 months we did our first study. I also have to tell you that we haven't added race or ethnicity to the data set. For us, that's a little bit more challenging because we're a global data set and race means different things in different parts of the world. And also race is less obvious than gender, and so it would be more difficult to assign people's race. We'd need everyone in the data set to assign it to themselves. So what we found that was interesting to me is that the number of companies with at least one female founder between the year of 2009 and 2015 had gone up. It had almost doubled. So we moved from about 10 companies who had an initial funding date in 2009 who had at least one female founder to the most recent numbers was 2015 had around 17%. So on the one hand, that felt really good because the numbers are trending up. And when I was out there in the industry and going to conferences, I felt like I was meeting more women in diverse roles as well as more women who were leading companies. So these numbers, on the one hand, fit with what I was experiencing. On the other hand, it also tells you we have an extremely long way to go. So these numbers are encouraging, but not so encouraging. I think the great thing about doing the studies in CrunchBase is we repeat these studies every year so that we can see over time how we're doing and whether things are trending up or whether things are flattening out. The next study we did was on founder educational background. So we took female founders as a bucket. We took male founders as a bucket. There were more male founders than female founders. And what we found is that men were twice as likely as a founder set to have a STEM degree. That wasn't surprising given the discussion that we've been having. What was interesting to me is that women were twice as likely to have a life sciences degree if they were a female founder, as well as 3 times as likely to have a mathematics undergraduate degree, which I thought those 2 indicators are encouraging. The other thing that was interesting from this study is that female founders are 4 times more likely to have an arts and humanities background. And I think given the creativity that's required to found a startup, I actually think this is a good background for a founder. The third study that we did looked at women in venture. A lot of people have talked about women in venture, but I was excited to do this because of our data set to go in. And not only can we run the study, but people can then go and look at CrunchBase and sort of dissect the trends as well. What we found globally when we looked at the top 100 firms, only 7% of investing partners at the top 100 firms were women. So the numbers in the venture community trail behind the rest of the industry quite significantly, and everyone's talked about these numbers not being great. Mostly in the industry, people had said it was around 4%, but we really combed through the data. We went through it over and over again. It took me 3 months to work on the study, and so the number was around 7%, and I don't think that's shifted massively. There have been some high-profile women join those top 100 firms. So at the time we did this study, which was in April this year, 62 firms had of the top 100 around the globe, had absolutely 0 female partners. Since then, Sequoia just recently last week announced Jess is now joining Sequoia as an investing partner, as well as Founders Fund hired Cy and Bannister. So the 62 I think has come down, but a middling amount, not a huge number. Again, these numbers are not great, and I think it's important because the whole industry needs to reflect on what's happening and why we're in this position today. We also looked at accelerators and corporate venture firms because I do meet more women when I go to accelerator events who are on the investing side, and similar with corporate venture because their structures are a little bit different. Those numbers are around 12%, again better, but not as good as they need to be. We also looked at women at the lower levels, at the associate, principal, and analyst levels, to see what those numbers looked like. In CrunchBase, those numbers are around 22%. And I do feel when I talk to a lot of venture firms, they are actively seeking to bring people in at the more junior levels. A lot of people say to me, well, those are not the people with power today. But I feel with the venture industry getting exposure, learning what it takes, possibly then moving out of the venture firm into industry, but understanding that world and coming back is an important kind of training ground, and leads me to believe that in the future we will see more women investors. We did also in the report look at a trend where there were more female women who'd had founder careers who were then going on to set up their own venture firms, smaller funds, but a significant trend for sort of seed stage or pre-seed stage venture firms. We also looked at funding in female startups. Again, it was interesting to run these numbers. I've heard Megan Smith often cite the fact that she said 4% of venture dollars go into companies that have a female CEO. When we ran it for female founders, around 10% of venture dollars are going into companies with at least one female founder, and about 12% of rounds. The seed numbers are a little bit better. It's 15 and 17, and hopefully as these companies move from seed to venture, we'll see the numbers on the venture side go up alongside that. Finally, CrunchBase just launched CrunchBase Pro. Every time I've run one of these studies, people have said to me, Gené, it's great to see the data, it's great to see the trends, but really what I want to see is the people behind it. I want to go and investigate and reach out and talk to the people that have made up these studies. We just launched CrunchBase Pro a month ago. It allows people to query the data set. So I've set up all of these queries. If anyone wants to follow up with me afterwards, I'm happy to send them to you. I've got a list of female founders of US-based companies, female partners of investor firms, female board members, and female CEOs. So CrunchBase is really about leveraging and allowing people to use the data for their own ends or their own insights. And I think CrunchBase Pro helps individuals do that. This is the list. I try to pull all the other lists because I couldn't go to these lists. This is the female founder list organized by CrunchBase Rank. And I think the number was around, it's in the region of around over 6,000 female founders in CrunchBase who are in the US. Thank you very much. You can reach me on Twitter at Gené Teare or Gené CrunchBase, and happy to share the studies with you, as well as any of the data underlying the studies. So thanks all.
I think that we have time for a quick question, if anyone wants to ask something to Gené. No? Maybe? This is a great opportunity. Trust me.
Thank you. I just want to know what, with all this information, how are the venture capitalists, now that they are aware of this, trying to make any change? Or are they just like, hey, we're going to found more female people? Or what are you doing with all this information that you're providing?
Yeah. So my experience of the venture capital industry is that I hear different things. You know, they're very small teams, largely men who tend to hire people that they know and trust, and so they're hiring more men. I think there is a very broad awareness within the venture capital industry that we have an issue. And the reason I think that's happening is because these venture firms are meeting more female founders, are coming to them and raising money. And when you just see men on the other side of the table, it's in stark relief. And so I think the pressure within the venture community is partly coming from this discussion, but it's also coming from the fact that the makeup of founders both from an ethnic perspective and from a gender perspective, are shifting. And that definitely, if you go in and it's all men on the other side of the table, you do think, what's wrong with this picture? And I think that's the pressure that we're bringing to bear on the industry. Again, we'd like the female founder numbers to be better, but that's how I kind of see the shift.
Thank you so much. Let's give a big applause to Gené.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.